What's up, everybody? Trying to figure out how Warski does that intro. What's up, everybody? No, that's not it. That's not it at all. Hey, everybody, it's Adam. I'm here. I'm doing part 2 of my books that I've read. I'm looking through here, and it seems like I think there's some books in here that I haven't actually read. This Learned Helplessness I started reading, but it had a very textbook feel to it. I think it is a textbook. Helplessness on depression, development, and death. The Federalist Papers I've not read yet. I went through and I dumped a bunch of new stuff in here. So Learned Helplessness I did start reading. This one I don't think I started reading. Learned Helplessness I did start reading. 5 Levels of Leadership. Proven Steps to Maximize Your Potential. I don't think I even listened. I might not have even downloaded some of these. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Boy, get ready. I'm going to be your boss soon. Adapting Minds, Evolutionary Psychology, and the Persistent Quest for Human Nature. I don't know that I've read this. David J. Buehler. I may have read it. I've read a ton of textbooks on evolutionary psychology. And a lot of the stuff in these books are repeated. So I read one book on evolutionary psychology that I think was the textbook from the current year. I think it was 2017. And I was amazed that they had Jonathan Haidt's work in there, which made me think, wow, okay, this guy is breaking through. He's already in the classroom. So No Two Alike is an amazing book. Harith Judas Rich. I actually just bought this book because I wanted the hard copy so I could actually go with the book and read along with the Audible so I could take notes. Hopefully to make some videos of Charles Murray Coming Apart is a great book. The infamous Bell Curve. I added this on April because Jenny McDermott. Now I think it's Jenny Kiss. Is it Jenny Kiss or is it Jenny? Yeah, I think it's Jenny Kiss. I had an exchange with her on Twitter about the Bell Curve. This is a great book. I was struggling to find the racist part of it. It reads like it was written by a liberal to me. The book is about how the book is about intelligence, and he makes the argument that there were a lot of jobs for unintelligent people, and now the highest paying jobs are given to intelligent people. So the society is kind of being sorted by intelligence. And it's creating this upper class that is very intelligent and this lower class that is not very intelligent. And that it's not really a good direction for society. The stratification of society is not healthy, and that we should find ways around this, which I totally agree with. And that sounds like a totally liberal idea, does it not? So even though Charles Murray is, oh, look, it doesn't have Charles Murray's name. I guess Charles Murray wrote this with another guy. But that's it. That's the Bell Curve. A Conflict of Visions. Thomas Sowell. This is a great book. Academic Agent will like to see that I've read that book. He's always quoting from this book. Thomas Sowell is not the greatest writer. It's kind of a slog to get through. He's very much like a textbook type writer, which he doesn't use a lot of metaphors. A lot of really good writers have got on board with the metaphors. Like if you can put pictures into people, if you can sell your ideas with pictures just by putting pictures into people's heads, it's a lot better. They'll remember it more. Jonathan Haidt does this amazingly. I think that's why that book stuck with me so much. I had listened to some of Jonathan Haidt's TED Talks, and it was back when I leaned more towards anti-theism, and his TED Talks just didn't resonate with me at all. And I go back and I look at those TED Talks and I think, wow, it's kind of all, it's all in here, but it's for some reason, everything from the book resonated with me more than the TED Talks. Maybe it just took a while to get through my thick skull. So, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers is Robert Sapolsky. I have not read this book yet. I started reading his book, Behave, and I didn't know I could do that with a click. I started reading his book, Behave, and then I think I saw an interview with him, and somebody had recommended this book in the interview. So I went to see if it was here. This is interesting because it's the conversation about socialism and whether or not, if all items on the market, like if we lived in a socialist society and all items on the market were free, Bertrand Russell makes the case that people wouldn't take more than they need, which is completely fictitious because in this Recordings for the Blind, well, I pay a monthly subscription for Recordings for the Blind now. When I originally got it, it was free. But you pay a monthly or a yearly subscription, and then it's as much as you want, and they have just tons of books. So, of course, I add as many books as I can to my library, and I don't necessarily, slog through them all. The Bully Pulpit, Theodore Roosevelt. This is a great book. A lot of history in this book. The Law of Public Communication was actually a book that girl with opinions was bragging on Twitter about having read for some class or something. So I thought, well, I'll see if it's there. And I read, I think, 2 or 3 chapters of it, and it is just boring as hell. But there's a lot of legal stuff in there that I thought was kind of interesting. Gulag Archipelago is one that Jordan Peterson is constantly recommending, constantly talking about. And this book is just crazy, totally crazy, trippy. It's the life of these people in concentration camps and stuff. It's difficult to read. It's kind of like a car accident. Like, you look at a car accident, you don't really want to look, but you do. That's what Gulag Archipelago is like. 2 Treaties of Government. John, there I have it. Loki, right there. And I have read this, but I got to tell you, I don't remember a lick of it because there's a language thing that goes on with some of these books, and it's almost like reading Shakespeare. It's not as bad as Shakespeare. It's not like crazy different language. On Liberty is kind of like that too. John Stuart Mill. I don't think I've read this, Jacques Rousseau, but it definitely takes a couple reads for me. I mean, other people, are much smarter than me, so they can probably just like blaze right through it, but not I. The first time through, I'm struggling to pay attention just because, and it's not necessarily the language, you can't understand it, but they don't use a lot of imagery. So if you're dealing with abstract thoughts all the way through, it takes a tremendous amount of focus to stay on abstract thoughts. And if they do 3 sentences in a row with 3 different abstract thoughts, after a while, you're just like, what's going on here? So On Liberty, I have 2 versions of On Liberty. I don't necessarily know why. Bowling Alone, which is a great book, Robert Putnam. I read this book because Jonathan Haidt references it a lot in Righteous Mind. Righteous Mind, I've read a lot of the books that Jonathan Haidt references in that book. The Righteous Mind is really a great overview book for a lot of different sources. That is a great book. Highly recommended. The Color of Justice, I put in here, but I never read. What is that? Maybe it's a novel. Personality Psychology, I probably read, but don't remember. Mind of the Market, Michael Shermer. I started reading this. I read about 3 chapters and I kind of got bored of it. Trust, I think I did the same thing. I read about 3 chapters and got bored. Beyond Revenge is an amazing book. It's a totally amazing book. I remember this book well. And we'll probably end up reading this book again because there's a lot of game theory in this book, a lot of dealing with prisoners' dilemmas and how we got from an eye for an eye, which is the Old Testament, and how we got to the New Testament, turn the other cheek, and why turn the other cheek is really so much better for society. And until you can get to turn the other cheek, you're going to be living in kind of I don't know that they use the term honor culture. I think they might use the term honor culture, but in order to go from honor culture to dignity culture, you have to get past this. Humans want to get even. We want to get even. So, you know, someone sleeps with our girlfriend, you know, someone insults our wife, someone scratches our car. Like, we want to get even. Even if accidents take place, we want to get even. That's human nature. So to go from wanting to get even, wanting revenge, to letting third-party courts mitigate your disputes, it took a lot of emergent social changes and just working at it. So, but this book gives a lot of the science behind why turn the other cheek is a great idea / meme that society should adopt. I don't know if there's a turn the other cheek meme in Islam. I'm curious about that. Probably not. It's probably just get even. Or The Evolution of Desire, Strategies of Human Mating, David M. Buss. This is a great book. I read The Murderer Next Door. I think it was in my other account. And after I read that book, I got all of his books. You can see I have another one here. Evolutionary Psychology, David M. Buss. Evolutionary Psychology, David M. Buss. These might be just updated. I've read all these books. Evolutionary Psychology, Evolutionary Psychology. They might be updated versions. If they're updated versions, I obviously don't read it. Sometimes the forward is different or something like that. Then I will read the forward, and if immediately it starts sounding familiar, I'll not read it. So, where were we at? The Evolution of Desire, Human Strategies for Mating. David M. Buss does a bunch of conversations with people. He works with questionnaires and he asks them different things and teases out different mating strategies. Super interesting book. I could see a lot of his stuff being quoted on dating sites. I don't know that it is, but it seems like something that would, like, Cosmo would just gravitate to immediately. So, Amusing Ourselves to Death, A Public Discourse on the Age of Show Business. You know, I don't know that I've read this. I don't know that I've actually read this, but I should read that. When was that added? I downloaded a bunch of books. I added a bunch of books at once. If you see a bunch of dates together, I've added a bunch at once. If I read this, I don't remember it, but I will probably take a look at that because it does sound awesome. The Black Swan is kind of a must read. I reread The Black Swan recently. And when I say read, I mean listen to. I have the book, The Black Swan, and I read the actual book, and maybe I read half the book because I'm really bad with real books. But then I got the audio book and I listened to the whole thing, and I was amazed. Well, I re-listened to it recently, and I did not remember it having so much in common with The Righteous Mind, but it does have a lot of things in common with The Righteous Mind as far as how people think. And he talks about the ecological fallacy, which I'm talking about constantly, but he calls it something else. He calls it the round trip fallacy. But he talks a lot about how the ecological fallacy / the round trip fallacy is what he calls it. How humans superimpose, they invert this idea. Like, a lot of people will say all terrorism is committed by Muslims. And it's very easy to invert that into your head and say all Muslims commit terrorism, which is completely fallacious. it's sure most of the terrorism is committed by Muslims, but there are almost 1 billion Muslims in the world. They're not all committing terrorist acts. So, but that little inversion that the mind does so easily, almost unconsciously, is how we get to people believing that all Muslims are terrorists. That's a problem. But it works for all kinds of things, not just Islamic terrorism. So all cops are dicks, right? No, wait. All assholes are cops? No, that doesn't work. There are plenty of assholes that aren't cops. So not all cops are dicks too. I have family in law enforcement, so go easy on the boys in blue. Saul Alinsky, is that Rules for Radicals in the wrong language? I have read Rules for Radicals. I wonder if I have it in here in the right language. I don't know why maybe it's a translation. But that's Rules for Radicals that Sargon's always recommending. And I have read Rules for Radicals. I don't get as much out of Rules for Radicals as Sargon, but Sargon is feels like a culture warrior. And I want to figure out, I feel I am more of a strategist. I'm like Switzerland. I don't like to take sides. Well, I don't like to take sides because I always I feel one side is always wrong. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be with that side. That side's wrong about that. So maybe liberalist is my jam. Maybe they'll get nothing wrong. But the thing that I think may be wrong with liberalists is that they may lean a little bit too much towards the rationalist end of the spectrum. And I'm an intuitionist, which is kind of a fundamental difference. So we'll see. The Culture Origins of Human Cognition. I don't think I've read yet, but I want to read. Geez, that sounds fascinating. Why We Cooperate. I have read. Another amazing book on kind of group selection type stuff. Is Killing Wrong? I'm going to go with yes. I don't remember this book. How Humans Evolved. I don't remember this book either. This book I do remember very well. Evolution for Everyone, How Darwin's Theory Can Change the Way We Think About Our Lives. David Sloan Wilson. I have yet to read David Sloan Wilson's book that is his bestseller, Darwin's Cathedral. And in Darwin's Cathedral, I've read the scientific papers I read one scientific paper that was an addendum to Darwin's Cathedral. Darwin's Cathedral came out and there was a bunch of criticism from the atheist community because in Darwin's Cathedral, he basically says that anti-theists like the Four Horsemen, Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and the other dude. Who's the other dude? I don't remember, but the Four Horsemen are not giving religion a fair hearing. And he actually devises an experiment to give religion a fair hearing. So his theory is the superorganism hypothesis for religious psychology, that religion groups people into cooperative groups that compete against other groups. And these groups end up out-competing one another. If the religion is good, and the religion can work exactly like evolution does. Evolution works on accidents, and those every once in a while those accidents are happy accidents, and it becomes adaptive. And any accident that turns out to be good for our reproduction, our survival and reproduction, then it gets passed down through the gene pool. Religions work the exact same way. They can adapt some arbitrary thing, and if that arbitrary thing makes the group function stronger, more cohesively, cooperate better, outcompete other groups better, then that adaptation spreads. But our genes spread very slowly because of the whole generational thing. But culture can spread much faster. Culture can change within generations. just by people copying one another. So, but he goes through, he selects religions at random and then does textual analysis of the religions and looks for certain words that are like cooperation words, self-sacrifice words. The idea behind the superorganism hypothesis of religion is that religion suppresses selfishness and helps people cooperate. So he looks for that in the religion. I mean, there's definitely that kind of stuff in Christianity that it's easy to see. So, but you can't just look at the big religions. He looks at the smaller religions and does analysis to see how long they lasted and that kind of stuff. So, and some of them are still around today, obviously. So it's a very interesting book. I haven't read, this book is about religion and evolution and other things other than religion as well. I think this might be a second book after Darwin's Cathedral. Darwin's Cathedral I've yet to read though. I want to badly. Make the audiobook, David Sloan Wilson. Come on. Slaughterhouse-Five, one of the few fiction books that I've read. On God and Political Duty, I haven't read. Sounds interesting. Communism, A History. I think I started reading a couple of these books on communism and they were really boring. So I abandoned ship. The Portable Karl Marx. Academic Agent will be happy to see that there since he thinks I'm a Marxist. I think Marx is very this whole cultural Marxism thing is awful. Totally awful. Taking Marx and turning like his ideas into everything, I just think they totally screwed over Marx. Marx got screwed over. When I read Marx, I don't see anything that's super crazy. I mean, the difference that I have with Marxism is property rights. But I wonder, and this is where it's very difficult to imagine now, and for some people, that we could live in a world without property rights. But if there are people today, like Uber is going to become a thing in our lifetime. There's going to be self-driving cars are going to become a thing, and owning a car will seem kind of ridiculous to people. I grew up, like if you didn't own a car, you were nobody. Kids today are they're not as interested in owning a car. So I wonder, like a lot of people in big cities, just they rent their whole lives. So I wonder if property, I guess somebody owns the building though. So I wonder if we will grow out of the property rights thing. I think property right now, you can't get rid of property rights. You destroy the economy. You destroy, like society would break down. A lot of the bad things that came about in history when people tried to adopt socialism or communism, it's an excuse for the elites to take away people's property. They say, this is going to be great. We're going to have a propertyless society. Everything's going to be free. And it's a total bait and switch. So they take the property away from everyone. And then they never redistribute it to the poor. They just keep it for themselves. And then you've got a brand new elite. They have all the property. You're not allowed to own property because they just want it all. So Marx is the perfect bait and switch for politicians. That's why I think people are so terrified of socialism or communism. And I completely agree. It's bogus. Quiet, I don't remember reading. Your Mother Was a Neanderthal, I don't remember reading. Why We Lie, The Evolutionary Roots of Deception and the Unconscious Mind, I have read, and it's another fascinating book. I believe they start off with deception because there's lying in nature is like camouflage and stuff like that. Deception in nature goes way back. So just it's a fascinating to look. I love looking at anything from an evolutionary perspective, so I'm hooked. The Theory of Moral Sentiments, Adam Smith, is another tough read because of the language thing. And they write so differently back then. Like writers today know that their writing must be entertaining at the same time. So Who's Afraid of Adam Smith? How the Market Got Its Soul. I don't remember reading. Maybe I read it, maybe I didn't. Clear the Bridge. The War Patrols of the USS Tang. I don't remember reading. Just and Unjust Wars, a Moral Argument for Historical Illustrations. I don't remember reading there. Sometimes I start reading these books. If I download like 5 books at once because I'm going on vacation or something, a lot of times I forget. This is actually good for me too because I will remember now, and there's some interesting books in here that I gotta dive into. But sometimes I read like the first chapter or so, and you get a feeling for the way it's written. And if I'm not feeling it, I'll move on to something else. Life is too short to read a book that sucks. All right. What do we got here? The Boston Massacre. I haven't read that yet. Poor People's Movement. Why They Succeed, How They Fail. I read a couple chapters of that. The Rules of Sociological Method, Emil Durkheim. Emil Durkheim is difficult to read too. I've tried to read Suicide multiple times, but it's a tough read. The Division of Labor and Society, Emil Durkheim. Emil Durkheim is the father of sociology. Suicide, A Study of Sociology. Another tough. That one I've actually gotten through and tried to read a second time, but it's a tough read. I've gotten through it, but with much zoning out. I don't know that I could give you the detailed notes on it. I need to read some of these and take notes and do a video, because then I will definitely remember them, which is one of the good things about making videos. Emil Durkheim, Selected Writings. Tough stuff. Descartes' Error, Emotion, Reason, and the Human Brain. This is a good book that kind of everybody references. So this, I believe, is, they use a lot of, there was a guy that got a spear, or not a spear, it was like a pipe. He was working on the railroad and they planted some explosive charges, and a pipe got blown through his head. It went up through his chin and like out the top of his head, and he lived, but his personality completely changed. So they did a bunch of studies on him, and they learned a bunch of stuff about emotion and reasoning, which the social intuitionist model, I think, is based on a lot of that research. Don't hold me to that, but I believe Jonathan Haidt references the Descartes' Error in The Righteous Mind. I'm pretty positive that he does, but so the book is kind of dry, to be honest with you, but it's kind of a must read. Don't know much about history. Everything you need to know about American history, but never learned. I probably have read that because I'm into things that are easy. It's Stephen Johnson. I guess these are backwards. I don't know. Maybe it is Johnson Stephen. This I have read. Everything Bad is Good for You. How today's popular culture is actually making us smarter. I think I talked to V about this on the last stream I was on with V. This book is a great book. And he makes the argument that a lot of people say that like video games are making kids stupid. You've heard people today make the case that video games make people stupid. Well, he goes back and looks at reading. And I guess before books came into being, people had an oral tradition where they would tell stories to one another. And people talked about how reading would just destroy society because we would lose. Like we all, you know, sitting around and hearing the stories is a social event. And if people read books alone in a room, just think they won't have any kind of social interaction and they'll learn how to talk to one another, which is, it's funny to think of. But every new technology that came along, like music, like somebody came out and said how this technology was just going to destroy society and it was the end of the world. So it's a great book in that it makes you think, okay, well, maybe this new technology won't destroy society, since that seems to be something that people continually say over and over again, but it never really seems to happen. So it's a great book. I highly recommend it. The Earth and Its Peoples, A Global History is obviously like a textbook. I don't remember reading it. Textbooks are dry. So a lot of times you don't remember them because it's obviously like they cover a ton of ground. There's no real narrative structure. So, but maybe that's not a textbook. I feel like maybe it is. The Invention of Air is an amazing book. It's about, now I can't remember who it is that invented air. But before we knew what air actually was, that air had oxygen in it and, you know, we breathe air, I guess people knew that you would suffocate because they probably suffocated people. So they knew people needed air, but nobody ever knew where the air came from. And we know now that air comes from plants, right? Plants take in carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide that we breathe, and they exhale air. Before there were plants, there was no atmosphere on the earth. The plants came along and they just they inhaled all the carbon dioxide from the volcanoes and whatnot, and they exhaled oxygen. And then animals could evolve because they filled this niche where there was all this free oxygen running around. I think they've done studies that show that the reason the dinosaurs could get as large as they could was because the oxygen in the atmosphere was so much richer than it is today. I think maybe we have 30% oxygen. Like, I'm just pulling numbers out of my rear, so don't hold me to any of these numbers. But I think I will go to the mat on that the oxygen was the atmosphere was a lot more oxygen rich back in the days, back in ancient history. So, but this guy figured out, God, I wish I knew who it was. Because I want to say Benjamin Franklin, but I don't think it's Benjamin Franklin. Maybe it is Benjamin Franklin. Let us know in the comments below if you know who invented air. But so he did a bunch of experiments where he like put a frog in a jar and was like, okay, well that killed it. But he like measured how long it took to kill it. So he was figuring out, you know, what air was. And then he built a terrarium, like a self-contained terrarium where the plants were putting out enough oxygen for the animals to live. And he figured out, he figured out the system that we all know today, which is fascinating. But the book also covers, like maybe I'm thinking it's Benjamin Franklin because Benjamin Franklin was one of his pen pals. But there's a lot of, like the Revolutionary War is going on at the same time. Oh, it's a fascinating book. Maybe it's not the Revolutionary War. I think it's the Revolutionary War, though. The American Revolution is going on at the same time. So that's kind of like the backstory that's going on in all this scientific development. Maybe it's the French Revolution or something. God, I should do book reports so I can remember these better. But it's a great book. I would definitely read it again and savor it. There's some book that I read that I can never find. That is a super book about innovation. And I don't know if I had it in my bookshelf and then took it out of my bookshelf. I don't know why I would do that, but I keep looking for that book and I have yet to find it. So I remember that book fondly. I've listened to it on a drive. So, An Imperfect God, George Washington, His Slaves, and the Creation of America. That's a pretty fascinating book. You realize, you read these books about American history and you realize that the people were people, like they had their own personal goals. Like George Washington's goal was to, like for Manifest Destiny, was to just obtain property. They were just like, all this free property, man. Let's eat it up. Let's turn all this property into cropland. Make a bunch of money. It'll be great. Free culture, how big media uses technology and the law to lock down culture and culture creativity. Lawrence Lessig. I might have read this book. I know I've read a Lawrence Lessig book, but I don't remember it. So, A Whole New Mind. Why right-brainers will rule the future. Daniel Pink. This might be the book that I was trying to remember. So I'm just going to assume that it is, because that book is totally awesome. So there in this book, and I don't know that this is the book, but help me in the comments if you've read this book or you know. So there's a book that talks about how design is really the way companies compete. They either compete in designing systems, the way that we manufacture products, or they compete in designing the products themselves. Like every cell phone manufacturer will get the raw materials to go into a cell phone for the same amount of money because they're buying those products on the open market. Like steel is the same if they buy it on the same day. Obviously, commodities fluctuate. But if they're buying on the same day, they're getting their raw materials for the same price. The only way that you can make a product that's worth more is because it is better designed. More people want it. So really the future is in design, which is just an amazing concept. Sometimes left-wingers will be baffled by the stock market going up again. Like they think, oh, we're going to run out of gas and oil. Like the stock market can't go up forever because, sooner or later we're going to run out of these raw materials. And that's not true. The stock market can go up forever because we live in what's called an information economy. And new knowledge is theoretically indefinite. We can design a better cell phone from here to infinity. We'll design other products, wireless charging, right? A transporter. We haven't even invented the transporter yet. We got a ways to go. So, the redesigning things is an infinite economy for us. So the stock market can't go up forever. Drive is about how we human drive, the human drive. That's an interesting book. Another Pink is great, is a great author. Drew Weston, Psychology, Brain, Behavior, and Culture. I don't remember this book. I got it after reading this book. Maybe I didn't. I got them on the same day. Well, this book I had in a paperback book or a hardback book. I had read this as the actual book. The Political Brain, The Role of Emotion in Deciding the Fate of the Nation. This I read before Jonathan Haidt. And Drew Weston is kind of a left-winger, but this was kind of my first introduction to the fact that emotion really is driving the ship. And that's why the Republicans are just stomping the Democrats over and over again, is because Democrats and left-wingers believe in reason. They believe you just tell people the right policies, what you're going to give them. They'll use their rational mind and come to the conclusion that we should vote for people we hate. Which is... it's not how things work. So they really need to redo the math on that little idea that they have going there. So, and Drew Weston is like, this book is all about how the left needs to redo the math on that. So it's a great book. If you love politics, this is a book I highly recommend. And I think I picked this book up because I went to see if there was an audiobook for that book so I could read it, listen to it again. So let's see. What do we got next? Psychology, which is just oh no, that's Drew Weston. This might just be a textbook though. Sometimes Drew Weston doing a textbook is actually kind of awesome. The Hidden Persuaders, I don't remember. Maybe I read it, maybe I didn't. Storm World, Hurricanes, Politics, and Battling Over Global Warming. Academic agent wants me to read that book and give him a book report on it. This is Chris Mooney. Chris Mooney's a popular author. So I don't remember reading this book. So I'd be curious to read it now. I'm not. Global climate change is real. I think there's things that we can do to stop it. And I think there are technological fixes. So I think that before things get too bad, we'll probably use some of those technological fixes. They might be terrible for us, as in we might simulate a volcano and shoot a bunch of particulate matter into the atmosphere. I don't know if you know this, but there's this thing called global dimming. There's a great documentary on it if you want to look it up online. I think it's a PBS documentary, so you can probably watch it for free. But when September 11th happened, all air traffic was halted for 3 days. And the skies were clearer than they ever have been. And some crazy shit happened with the weather. And climatologists were like, this is totally bizarre. Like it's much hotter during the day and it's much colder at night. It kind of did this way big fluctuation thing. And they figured out that from the air traffic flying constantly over the United States and, back and forth to Europe, all over Europe, air traffic every single day is causing global dimming, which is counteracting global warming. So the sun, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is actually increasing the temperature, but the chemtrails from all the air traffic is actually lowering the temperature. So airplane right there, they're putting out some chemtrails right now for us, causing global dimming. You can look up global dimming too. So I'm sure it's on there, but so it's actually kind of counteracting the effects of global warming. They say if air traffic were to stop for some reason, like global warming would just shoot out of control, because right now this is something that they weren't considering, that climatologists weren't taking into consideration. So, but this is something that we could do artificially if we just shot like particulate matter into the atmosphere. So it's an interesting concept, and I've seen some other writing on it. The Origin of Virtue, Human Instinct, and the Evolution of Cooperation. I remember this book quite well. It's a very good book. Very good book. A lot of game theory, a lot of evolutionary psychology. Excellent, excellent book. Game Change. This is about the Obama, I believe it might be the 2008 Obama election. Great book. If you're into politics, it's a great book. How the Mind Works, Steven Pinker, another great book. The Blank Slate, must read for everyone. Got to read this book. Tabula Rasa, people talk about, is also, that means the blank slate. And the idea behind the blank slate is that human beings are born as a blank slate that you can write any culture on that you want. And as Jordan Peterson is fond of saying, no, that's not true. Human beings are born with a chessboard on the mind with chess pieces set up. And while you can play a number of different games with those pieces and board, you're still bound by the rules of biology, or the rules of chess as the metaphor goes. So, and Jonathan Haidt makes this case. Steven Pinker makes this case. I think Jonathan Haidt is making this case that Steven Pinker made when the blank slate came out. This may be an update. I see it's 2012. Blank Slate came out in 2002. The Stuff of Thought Language as a Window into Human Nature. That's another great Steven Pinker book. Steven Pinker has I believe this is this book, he goes into linguistics and the evolution of linguistics. There's a great passage that I remember about profanity and how profanity used to have a much greater effect on people because you're putting like dirty images into people's minds that they don't want to put into it. I mean, it's like kind of nails on a chalkboard, or, you know, somebody will say something that's just gross and it's a gross image, and immediately you'll get that image in your head and you're like, why the fuck did you do that, dude? Please stop. So he talks about that there. He talks about a lot of stuff, language related in there. The Plague, Albert Camus. I started reading this book, but I never finished it. Same with The Fall. Albert, I love the book The Stranger. I reread The Stranger, and I thought I should try these other books. And they are they're not great for story. I'd say The Stranger's probably got the best story in it. Sometimes his novels are kind of meandering. The Stranger's a great book, though. I highly recommend it. I don't know that I finished The Plague or The Fall. I don't believe that I did. Rules for Radicals. There's Saul Alinsky in English. That's the one that I've read. More chemtrails. There it is. Well-being, the foundation of hedonic psychology. Probably another textbook. Oh no, that's Daniel Kahneman. I don't remember this book. I've read Thinking Fast and Slow, and I probably picked it up. Sometimes I go in here and I'm like, okay, I go in there to get like Thinking Fast and Slow, and Kahneman's got half a dozen books, so I'll just put them all on my thing. Einstein, His Life and Universe. Walter Isaacson. Walter Isaacson is the man. He's the same guy that did Steve Jobs' autobiography, which is another great autobiography. American Sketches, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it's just a bunch of different kind of short stories about the history of America. The Rational Optimist is a great book. The Rational Optimist is an amazing book, which it gives you a bunch of reasoned arguments why we should be happy that we live in the time that we live. That people have a romantic notion of the past that's totally fallacious. So he goes into the past and how terrible it was and how great it is that we have things like penicillin and all these modern things that we just take for granted these days. The Happiness Hypothesis, Jonathan Haidt's first book. This is a great book. Jonathan Haidt has many times said in interviews that I guess this book was originally supposed to be called 12 Truths from Ancient Wisdom, and he got in a deadline with his publisher, so all of a sudden it became 10 modern truths from ancient wisdom, like just hack a couple off, which as a writer, respect. That's the way to do it right there. But this is a great book. This book he introduces the elephant rider metaphor that he uses in The Righteous Mind. The elephant rider metaphor is the metaphor that the mind is like an elephant with a rider, and the rider is our conscious reasoning, and the elephant is our emotional intuition. And the elephant is really driving the show, but the rider thinks he's in charge because he's got the little reins. But in reality, the elephant will go wherever it wants to go. You got to kind of, when you ride an elephant, you got to kind of coax it where you want to go. And that's how we have to handle our intuitions as well. George Lakoff, I've read all of his books. Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things is a great book. He talks a lot about how language and the mind works, and it's just fascinating. It is fascinating. I highly recommend that book. Moral Politics is also a book that I was completely fascinated by. I need to reread it now that I'm not in the liberal bubble, because Lakoff is very much in the liberal bubble, I feel. And this book is written to make you think conservatives have kind of a mental illness, Moral politics, how liberals and conservatives think. It's all about how liberals think correctly and conservatives think incorrectly. So, poor George. Poor George, trapped in the liberal bubble. He goes to, first of all, he's a professor at UC Berkeley. So he's surrounded by the liberal bubble. The liberal bubble goes all around Berkeley. It goes all, oh, my camera's over here now. Goes all around Berkeley. The liberal bubble. This is the liberal bubble around Berkeley. Okay. So, Metaphors We Live By is a great book. Not as much liberal bubble because he's just talking about language and how language affects us, affects our daily lives in ways that we don't ever even think about. Language, I've done this a couple of times. I did a stream with Shannon Q where we were talking about anti-theism, and she kept picking these negative words for religion, like, dictate, which is, dictator is what she's meaning. It's instead of saying, it helps me organize my life. She's like, it dictates how I'm going to live my life, which is, you can tell a lot about what people are thinking by the words that they use. That's something that I got from George Lakoff. The words mean everything. Got to pay attention to the words people use. Switch, I don't remember at all. I think this was a recommendation. I think this was referenced in Jonathan Haidt's book. But I have no idea what it's about. But it looks like a good book. It looks like a modern book. Sometimes these books are old. There's a lot of old books in here. Communist Manifesto's in here. That's old. Utopia's old. I guess this is the date that I added it. That's not the date that it was published. So that's the answer to the blank slate. Oxford Book of Modern Science Writing. Oh, it's Richard Dawkins. Oh no, he's the editor. The Blind Watchmaker, Richard Dawkins. I've also read The God Delusion. I've read a bunch of Sam Harris's books too, but I've read those actually in book form. I'm not going to get my bookshelf out here, but I do actually own some real books. Utopia, I don't remember. The Communist Manifesto is, so I'm in this communist club and we're forced, like we have to go in, we have to memorize sections of the Communist Manifesto. Okay, that's a lie. I'm joking. I'm totally joking around. I want Academic Agent to have something he can clip out. Yes, no, I'm not a communist. I believe in the future, we might all be communists. Once they figure out superabundance, once we have machines that make other machines, we may have to have communism. Otherwise, we won't have human beings. So the robots will have taken over. So we'll either have communism or the robots are going to take over. There's your two choices. Transcend is Ray Kurzweil. I believe I've read all of Ray Kurzweil's books. I've read The Age of Spiritual Machines, Singularity is Near. I've read all those books, but I don't have them in here. I might have them in here. Maybe I do. Altering Fate, Michael Lewis. I don't remember that book, but I think I have read it. Not sure though. No, actually, I think I started reading this book and it got into some medical stuff that was kind of gross. So I abandoned ship. No, because that's a book on checklists. I don't remember Altering Fate. Handbook of Emotions. I don't remember. The New Thing is a great book about technology, I believe. The Big Short is a great book they made into a movie. Short History of Nearly Everything is a good book. Talks about the if I remember correctly, the development of various technologies and scientific discoveries. So, but I'm to the end. I finally made it. That's the end. There we go. Those are all the books in my in my second Audible account, Audible-ish account. So let me know what you think of this video. Let me know if you have any questions below. Obviously, there are some books. There's a book that I recommend a lot, A Long Way Gone, the history of child soldiers, I believe it is. That's a book that I recommend a lot. There's a book that's not in here that I thought was in here, that I just thought of. Columbine, that I'm recommending a lot. I swear, maybe that was in my Audible account. I don't remember from the other video, but Columbine is a great book that I recommend a lot. I just remember that because I was fascinated when I heard Jordan Peterson talking. I guess there's mentions of Columbine in his new book, and he got the narrative for Columbine. He uses the narrative that was popular in the mainstream media that the book Columbine completely debunks. Like, the mainstream media got it wrong on Columbine, go figure. So most of the stuff they put out in the mainstream media about them being bullied teens was just fake news, totally fake news. So, but I'll end it there.